So next we have a 30-year-old man who is brought to the emergency in respiratory distress after a shotgun wound to the face. There is a possible cervical spine injury. So what is the question asking? So which of the following is the best way to gain a rapid access to control the airway? So this is a trauma MCQ where a face or facial gunshot wound is present and they are asking a very basic question that what step should be taken to take control of the airway. Should it be nasotracheal tube, percutaneous jet ventilation, cricothyroidotomy, endotracheal intubation, aspiration of blood from the pharynx and jaw thrust? So as this patient is having a facial wound, so endotracheal tube is very less likely to be used. So the best option is cricothyroidotomy in this case. So a patient who is having a massive mid-face trauma, cricothyroidotomy or tracheostomy are preferred. But cricothyroidotomy can be performed more quickly as compared to tracheostomy, and nasotracheal and endotracheal tube will cause more damage by pushing blood and debris into the trachea. So in this scenario, cricothyroidotomy is the preferred answer. So next we have a 14-year-old boy who is hit in the right eye with a stick. There is extensive ecchymosis. On physical examination, the upward gaze is found to be lost. So upward gaze is lost. So what is the most likely diagnosis in this? That which muscle is specifically responsible for the upward gaze? Will it be superior rectus, inferior rectus, superior oblique, levator palpebrae superioris or medial rectus muscle? So for the upward gaze of the eye, there are two muscles which are responsible. Number one is the superior rectus and second, less commonly, is the inferior oblique. So in this scenario, our answer will be superior rectus. However, if the option has inferior oblique, you should also consider that as well. So loss of upward gaze of the eye should not be confused with the failure to elevate the upper eyelid because that is done by the levator palpebrae superioris muscle, which contains both striated as well as non-striated component. So levator palpebrae superioris is for the eyebrows, whereas for the actual movement of the eyeball, that is the upward gaze, we have superior rectus as well as inferior rectus. Inferior oblique muscle. So here I have added a chart in which there are different muscles, their primary, secondary and tertiary actions. You are primarily supposed to know the primary actions. So for lateral rectus, the function is abduction. For the medial rectus, it does the adduction. The superior rectus does the elevation. Inferior rectus does the depression. Superior oblique is for the intorsion, that is the inward rotation of the eye, and inferior oblique is the extorsion, that is the outward rotation of the eye. You can pause the video and make your own notes, but please make sure that the primary actions are of primary importance. However, you should also be aware of the secondary as well as the tertiary actions of the eye muscles. So next we have a car crash in which a face of the patient is hit to the steering wheel. So this is a 37-year-old female who presents with a facial deformity. The X-ray shows a transverse fracture which is passing through the articulation of the maxillary as well as the nasal bones with the frontal bone. So this fracture also passes below the zygomatic. So they have described the location of the fracture and now you are supposed to identify that what is the name or what is the type of this fracture. So will it be sphenoid vein fracture? Will it be Le Fort type 2 fracture? Petrous temporal fracture? Will it be parietal split or mandibular disruption? So this description best describes the Le Fort type 2 fractures. So Le Fort is a classification of the facial trauma and I will explain this with the diagram in the next slide. So as you could see that the facial trauma is classified into type 1, type 2 and type 3 Le Fort fractures. So type 1 is an horizontal fracture with alveolar ridge involvement. Type 2 involves the nasofrontal suture as you could see over here. And type 3 is having a craniofacial dislocation. So it is a result of rapid impact of the face to to any trauma, that is in a car accident or specifically anything that gets the face like a bat. So in type 1, what could be the features? There could be swelling of the upper lip. There could be buccal surface bruising on the inside. There could be loosening of the teeth as well. In type 2, if there is a word that is the mid face, then you will directly come to type 2 injury. So there will be widening of the intercanthus space, mobility of the upper jaw and nose. There could be nasal bleed, and there could be CSF fluid leak in the form of rhinorrhea as well. So these are the important features along with the ecchymosis or the periorbital edema. In type 3, it is similar, but there will be flattening of the face. So if this word is given, then you will directly jump to the type 3 injury. So there could also be orbital hooding, anophthalmosis, and the most importantly, if there is eardrum discharge or the hemotympanum, then that will be giveaway for the LIFO type 3 injury. So next MCQ states, a 34-year-old man is hit in the face with a baseball bat and presents to the emergency with a massive facial swelling, ecchymosis, and an elongated face. I guess I have explained this in the previous MCQ. So there is mobility of the middle third of the face, and again, what is the diagnosis? So I guess you do not have to even read the MCQs. It is well clear that it will be a LIFO type 3 injury. So next we have a 26-year-old man is stabbed in the right intercostal space in the mid-clavicular line and presents to the emergency. So on examination, there is subcutaneous emphysema of the right chest wall, absent breath sounds, and a trachea shifted to the left. So I guess this is very easy MCQ as this point is giveaway. So the diagnosis in this would be tension pneumothorax. I have explained these features of tension pneumothorax in the pneumothorax video of the trauma series. You can also check that video for more detail on the different types of pneumothorax and specifically the tension pneumothorax. So I have added these images for the visual concepts. So this is the mid-sternal line which is present in the midline of the body. This is the mid-clavicular line. So they have said that the patient is having injury over here in the 5th, 6th or 7th intercostal space in this line. So the area or the organ which is just behind this line is the lungs. So in this scenario over here we have kind of right lung. So in this area there is any injury, then the likely structure is damaged is the lungs, and the pathology associated with that is going to be either tension pneumothorax or open pneumothorax. So this is the anterior axillary line. So have a better view of the axillary lines in this lateral view of the patient. So axilla is divided by 3 lines. We have the anterior axillary line, we have the mid axillary line, and we have the posterior axillary line. So this anterior line passes through the anterior lining or the fold of the axilla, and the posterior one passes from the posterior fold of the axilla. So mid axillary line is the responsible or it is a landmark for passage of the chest tube, and mid clavicular line is just for the understanding that lung is lying at this area. So to explain the tension pneumothorax with the help of a diagram, so if there is development of tension pneumothorax, there will be pressure inside this pleural space and it will push the lung, the mediastinal boundary to the outside as well as to the opposite side, and eventually the lung boundary will be compressed, and this will be very much clear visible on a chest x-ray. So this is a very easy diagram to help you understand and visualize what the clinical picture of tension pneumothorax could be. So next up we have a 31-year-old man. He is shot in the back of the left chest and the bullet exits through the left anterior. So this is a gunshot wound to the chest with a through and through injury. The patient's vital is 130/90 blood pressure, 28 respiratory rate, 110 pulse. The X-ray shows hemothorax. So they have given you the diagnosis that the patient is having hemothorax. A chest tube is inserted and it yields 800 ml of blood. The first and second hour drainage is around 200 ml and 240 ml per hour. So what will be the next step? So they have given you some values. In reference to these values, with an already inserted chest tube, in the case of hemothorax, what will be the next step? So, should we be placing a second chest tube? Call for auto transfusion of blood, transfuse and observe drainage for another hour, insert a Swan-Ganz catheter, or perform a lap thoracotomy. So, if you know the indications for thoracotomy, these are perfectly aligning with that. So, we will perform a left-sided thoracotomy. So, a patient bleeding at a rate of more than 200 ml per hour in case of an emergency will require a thoracotomy. Autotransfusion of the blood collected through the chest tube should be considered for lesser degree of bleeding, but if there is this much amount of bleeding, then you will definitely be going for thoracotomy. This is the flowchart diagram for the flail chest. I have explained this in the trauma series. So here the important thing is that what are the indications for urgent thoracotomy? If there is 1500 ml blood, immediately add intubation of the chest tube. 200 to 250 ml per hour for 3 to 4 hours, or 100 ml per hour for continuous 8 hours, or 120 ml consecutively for the 15 minutes. So if any of these is present, you will go with the thoracotomy. So next important thing is that it is performed in the anterolateral fifth intercostal space. So this is very important landmark to perform the thoracotomy. So next we have in the patient described above, so that in the case of a hemothorax patient, the likely cause of bleeding is from which vessel or which structure's injury. So would it be because of the pulmonary artery, the lung parenchyma, or internal thoracic artery or the intercostal arteries, pulmonary vein, or the left atrium? So the bleeding in case of hemothorax is from the internal thoracic artery or the known as the Memby artery, or it could be from the intercostal arteries. So a 60-year-old man crashes his car in a bridge and he is found to have slumped over with the steering wheel. In the emergency, there are signs of pericardial tamponade. So again, they have given you the diagnosis. So what are they asking? These findings are likely to be because of, so they are attributed to which of the following. Just like in the previous MCQ, they have asked that which structure's injury is going to cause the hemothorax, and in this MCQ, they are asking that which structure's damage is responsible for the pericardial tamponade. So either it is because of the coronary artery laceration, left or right atrial rupture, coronary vein laceration, or intrapericardial vena cava injury. So it is because of the coronary arteries laceration. So tamponade from the blunt trauma to the heart is usually because of either myocardial rupture or coronary artery laceration. The left coronary artery gives off the left anterior interventricular artery that passes on the anterior surface of the heart. Let me explain this with a diagram. So the main blood supply of the heart is coming from the ascending aorta. So it gives off the right coronary as well as the left coronary artery. Now the left coronary artery is going to give the left anterior descending artery which runs on the anterior surface of the heart in the interventricular grooves. The right coronary artery passes through the groove between the right atria as well as the left right ventricle. So next we have, following an injury to the shoulder joint, a New York Yankees catcher developed a catcher's mitt hand or shoulder and handle rope. There was swelling of the right upper extremity, skin atrophy, and vasomotor instability. He also complained of burning sensation in the involved extremity. So what will be the next step in the management of the patient who has developed after a shoulder trauma the hand-shoulder syndrome. Would it be immobilization of the right arm in cast to avoid physical therapy for 3 months, forceful shoulder joint manipulation, prednisolone for 2 weeks in resistant cases, or surgical procedure on the wrist joint? I guess this is the option which you can definitely exclude. So in this scenario, the option will be prednisolone for the pain as well as the vasomotor instability. So prednisolone is given for 2 weeks in resistant cases and then it is tapered down. So the patient develop this reflexive autonomic dystrophy, that is otherwise known as the shoulder hand syndrome. It occurs after an injury and causes immobilization of the ipsilateral extremity. Well, the treatment is directed towards gradual physical therapy and non-steroidal analgesic drugs. Stellate ganglionic block can be helpful in resistant cases. So there is a 47-year-old woman who was involved in a skiing accident, suffered a severe blow to the mid upper abdomen. Physical examination revealed diffuse tenderness, but there is no evidence of rebound tenderness or guarding. So which test would be performed to rule out traumatic pancreatitis? Would it be peritoneal lavage, serum amylase, CT scan with oral or IV contrast, upper GI study, or ERCP? So to identify blunt trauma abdomen causing traumatic pancreatitis, the best investigation is CT scan with oral as well as intravenous contrast. As I have explained in the previous pancreatic trauma MCQ, that ERCP is only used if you have a suspicion or you want to identify the main pancreatic duct injury. But to identify or establish the diagnosis that whether any part of pancreas is having any traumatic rupture or problem, then first of all we will have CT with oral or intravenous contrast. So CT scan with oral and intravenous is the diagnostic tool. ERCP is useful to identify pancreatic injury, but CT scan has more accurate identification. Upper GI series can show duodenal C loop widening. So this is an important point that they can also give you in a scenario that an upper GI series has been done in a patient who presented with blunt trauma to the abdomen and there is widening of the duodenal C loop, and then you will be suspecting traumatic pancreatitis. An isolated amylase is having a less or not having any diagnostic capability. Repeating amylase, its amylase levels increase with time, may be diagnostic of traumatic, but it has not established any literature value till now.